Hi there, and thanks for joining me again. Hi there, and thanks for joining me again for this week's edition of your Wheel and Anchor weekly newsletter. I was overwhelmed by the number of responses I received from last week's newsletter, where I talked about the frustration and the anguish that's generally felt across our membership. All of you who are in your golden years of travel and all of those aspirations for those years of exploration and adventure have been put on pause. Clearly that sentiment is shared by many of our members. Listen, my thoughts are with you on that. And the one thing that did come through, though, as well, is that there is an underlying sense of optimism. This will pass, hopefully sooner than later. But one of the questions that was asked by a number of people in their response: when do I think we can return to travel? Well, I mean, if I had the answer to that question, it's a little bit like waving a magic wand at this point, I think. But the one thing I can say is that we won't be traveling again until it is safe to do so. And so I put together sort of a list of the criteria that I feel will be necessary for us to travel overseas. And hopefully we can meet many or all of these in the near future. I think first and foremost, I think it is going to be critical that the situation at home has stabilized, and that the amount of community transmission goes back to the numbers that we saw or in the latter part of the summertime. Of course, we seem to be entering the second wave right now in Canada, and that I think that the fact that there's uncertainty about the situation at home probably would indicate that it's just not a good time to go anywhere else. And certainly numbers in Europe have been climbing as well. So I think until the situation at home stabilizes, that would be, I think, the first checkbox, if you will. The second one, of course, would be the travel advisory issued by the Canadian Department of Foreign Affairs. At the moment, as you know, that travel advisory, of course, still very much in effect, advising against all non-essential travel outside Canada. And that, of course, has an impact on the ability to get travel insurance as well, not to mention the extent to which the Canadian government would step in the event that there was a problem that a traveler faced overseas. So that would be the second point. Third of all, of course, the availability of travel insurance itself. And I was pleased to see that Manulife came out with a new COVID-19 policy. There are strings attached to it for sure. So anybody that is thinking about taking to the road in the not too distant future, I would certainly give that some thought, but I would look carefully at the fine print, as it were, in terms of what that entails. The fourth situation, of course, the fourth criteria I would say is that there has to be reliable flights going to the destination in question. As you may know, as you will undoubtedly have read, airlines have had a real tough time throughout this pandemic, and they're still struggling to fill routes to the point where they can operate them on a regular and reliable basis. And until we know that for sure, I think that would be a barrier to traveling overseas. Then, of course, there is the issue of the situation in the destination country. And of course, as I said, we are seeing resurgence of the pandemic across Europe. And until that situation comes back under control, I think that we wouldn't be able to travel to any country where the pandemic is very much underway. And I think it's important to note that there are countries here in Thailand, for example, where they very much have the situation under control. But of course, many of those countries, New Zealand, which had a resurgence and now seems to have gotten it under control, and Taiwan and Thailand, and there are a number of countries where you could travel to, in theory, except that the borders are closed, so they won't let you in. So needless to say, that's a prerequisite to traveling as well. I would say that another criteria I would look to is a testing protocol that is proven reliable and exists either through the airline. Of course, Air Canada is launching their own set of COVID-19 tests, and or at the destination airport. And so knowing that testing is being rigorously undertaken so that arriving travelers aren't contributing to the problem, for me, would be another criteria in determining whether we can travel at all. And of course, last but not least is the vaccine. And, you know, this is a controversial point for some. I think for most of us, having a vaccine available that is proven, tested, and safe will probably be the single most important factor in determining whether we can travel. I do think that some of the other criteria that I have mentioned may enable us to travel sooner than when a vaccine that is universally acceptable is actually available. But that remains to be seen. I know there's a lot of work being put into it, and there's been a lot of progress made of late. So let's see what happens. But to answer that question that many of you raised, I think those 7 criteria are the ones that I would certainly be looking at before making a decision on whether or not it would be safe to travel. So crossing our fingers that we can check those boxes off before too long. So just 2 things coming up as we plan for the future. Our Future Travel Forum Edition 4, focusing on Central and Southeastern Europe, will take place this coming Thursday, October the 8th at 11 o'clock a.m. We'll be talking about cities such as Vienna, Prague, Budapest, Sofia, and many more. So please come out and join us for that. We've had great turnout for the last couple of webinars. And following that, our newest program, which is being launched, which will, we actually have a copy of the brochure attached today, which is Egypt. And we had a marvelous trip earlier this year in January. It was the last big trip we did with Wheel and Anchor. We all had a fantastic time, and we look forward to be going back to Egypt in November of next year. So about 13 months from now. And we'll be having a webinar to talk all about that program a week later on October the 15th at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. So some exciting things in the works, and we continue to dream and plan and look forward to the day when we can get back to traveling again. So in the meantime, I wish you all a happy week. I look forward to connecting from you, and keep those comments coming back.